journey to greenhouse was like a squiggly line. Like I did not, I got an art degree in at UConn in studio art, and I concentrated in photography and video and graphic design. And I thought I'd do maybe something more in the commercial world, but I definitely did not have digital scholarship in mind. I'd never even heard the term digital scholarship or digital humanities really at all. So that was not at all on my radar. I ended up getting a job in at Trinity College as an art fellow there, and I was doing a little bit of like a teaching assistant position, a little bit of studio work, a little bit of gallery work, and in that job, it was just like I had so many different hats, and I kind of really liked them all, but it didn't really give me a sense of like what I wanted to do next. And I just happened to have a friend who worked in the archives on a human rights documentarian's photography collection. Well, it's photography, video, a bunch of stuff. And he was going to be moving on. And so he was like, I think you would really like this job. And so I started working there after that fellowship. And that was like the first time I had kind of more gotten into like the library world. And in that job, it was basically taking all this work of this photographer and videographer. He would like travel all over the world capturing images and video of child laborers like all around the world. And he was like a really prolific documentarian, and his collection was huge. Like if you imagine just taking like your entire hard drive, like everything you've ever made as an artist, and just like donating that to an archive, that's what we had. And my job as somebody who works in that type of format was to be able to like recognize what type, like how he would have worked, and start to kind of sift through this huge collection. And so that's how I got to the UConn Library, and started working with Greg Colati and some others. And it was like this job came up at Greenhouse Studios, and I was like, I have no idea what, a lot of these things in these job descriptions are just based on what like the research focus was. But the job description for a design technologist is basically a maker who can wear, maybe has like a specialty, but can wear a bunch of different hats. And that was like exactly what I had been doing from pretty much my art degree through Trinity and then through archiving, where it was like you're doing some research like in maybe the more traditional sense, but then your research in the art sense. And I think to some people those are two different things, but like as a designer kind of working in this area, like those two things merge really well. So that's kind of like where I find myself now. But before I got here, like this is not really a field I even knew existed. So it's been hard to be remote, especially when so much of like the great work that we do is done in person, and it's done at the kitchen table, which is like that big table in the middle of the studio that we all kind of land at some points through the day. And when we're there, like we end up just kind of talking about whatever we're working on. And that's where you not only get to see, what other people are working on, which is, increasingly different. Like it used to, if there were less things going on, a lot of the time there was a lot of overlap, but now there's projects that people are working on that I never see. And now being remote, like I hear about them in updates, but like I really have no contact with those things. So that I miss. But the other thing that would happen at the kitchen table is really where new ideas get generated. And I think we've done a good job of keeping everything moving while we're remote. We've done a lot of onboarding of people, as you know, remotely, and that's been really hard. But I think using, so really finding like a video platform that worked well for us. Zoom, I think, seems to be the best one for us. Slack is like the biggest communication tool that we use. It always has been. And so we've always been big on Slack, and some of the reason that I think maybe it was a little easier for us to transition to being fully remote is because we're used to having group members that are not always, in the studio. We do have a handful of us that are full-time in the space of me, Sarah, Tom, Wes, and Garrett. And then there's like another group that is in the space very often, which are like more of the core members. And then there's like some of the, and by core members, I mean like people that are, on multiple teams and might be kind of like steering things a little bit. And then there's project team members who maybe aren't even at UConn at all. Like we have some that aren't even in the country. So we're used to having to, find strategies for communicating with those people and keeping them in the fold as things are moving along. So I think that, and Slack is one way that we do that. So I think for us, that did make the transition a little smoother because we just had to kind of extrapolate that to everybody. So it's painful in some ways because like I am extroverted and I really miss just like going to lunch with people and, all the things that kind of happen in between. I feel like my answers are kind of different for how I find my own inspiration versus maybe how I find Greenhouse Studios inspiration. So with Greenhouse Studios project, it's really kind of a mix of where I might find charges from, because a lot of what will inspire me is really the conversation with the people that I'm working with. I'm definitely like, I find a lot of connections being made when I hear people talk about different things. Like one thing I really like is being able to pull other people's ideas together and synthesize that into something. So for me, like that conversation is like huge in idea generation. And a lot of time people will share things and I might find myself going down a rabbit hole of like, clicking different links and finding different things online. But yeah, I find like just that conversation of spurring that initial, rabbit hole of research is important. For my own work, I don't know if I know how to answer that. Like I feel like my husband just used it, bless you. I feel like I get inspiration from like places I don't expect to. Like this is gonna sound like a weird response, but I had to make this like to-do list app one time for Joel's class. And the app I made, I called Docket, and it was like hot pink. And the thing that inspired me for that was a hot pink Home Depot bucket that I saw. Like, and for some reason I was like, man, I really want that bucket. It just is like, it's such a happy feeling thing. Like I find hot pink to be so motivating. And for some reason that bucket stuck with me. I'm like, I should get that bucket. And when I made this app, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to make it hot pink because I like the way that made me feel. And I have no other, like, there's no other charge for me to make something for this app. But like when I have something to do, like I need a little bit of cheer and like I need to be kind of motivated and energized to do that thing. So I do find that like inspiration like that comes from weird, like random, simple things that stick with you. And it for me, it's almost always attached to some sort of like emotional feeling, because that's just how I am. I think for me, it's maybe not so much a specific prompt, but more thinking about like the overarching questions of collaboration and how like the way that we work. I think like I spend a lot of time, just because I really like kind of organizational like psychology and development, that kind of thing, that I really like I feel like that sits with me a lot is, okay, how is everybody connecting to each other, and is everybody getting what they need? Is everybody fulfilled? Like those are things that always are sitting with me. So I know that's not really like like a prompt, but I do think that's something that we think about a lot at Greenhouse, is like we want to make sure that everybody's getting what they need out of the projects, and that the work that they're doing is fulfilling, and that, because that's a huge driver of if they're if people are invested in the project. And I think like for me, I think that carries over to Greenhouse at large, of like trying to help people build investment in Greenhouse Studios, probably because I'm very invested in Greenhouse Studios. So yeah, I think that's like kind of the thing that colors everything. One thing that I think is so valuable about working at Greenhouse, especially for people like in the digital media and design world, is that you get to work with a lot of people that do nothing like what you do. So for example, like I work with historians and writers and philosophers and all these people that like I probably wouldn't work with if I were just working within my major, unless I were to somehow seek them out. But that brings so much perspective now, not only on like the content of the work that I'm working on, but it also like really forces you to think about the way that you're like verbally expressing your ideas. You want to make sure that you're, if I'm saying like, here's the treatment I want to make for a website, for me to lay out wireframes or something for somebody who is like me, they might see things a little bit, differently. But then, to me, it's the equivalent of if you were working with a client, if you were like working in a different firm and you're trying to show somebody an idea, it's so important that you're able to communicate that quickly and like right at the first pass, because they're not going to take it like if you don't. So I think like for other students, I don't personally want to work in the commercial world, so there's that. But I think for other students, like getting that type of experience, and from my perspective as somebody who works with students, I like to think that we give our students a lot of license to like be real grown-up professionals who can like lead meetings and present their own work and really like use their own voice. And I think like I know I had opportunities like that when I was a student, and to me that was the most valuable thing, because one thing like you really need to gain is confidence in yourself, and that you can kind of pull the project off, and that you can be a competent team member. And for some of us that's harder than others to like build that confidence. So I like to think that a place like Greenhouse offers that. And for me, being a student just as much feeds what I'm doing professionally, because I'm really building like my web skill set that way. I've taken a writing class that I think has improved. Writing is more of my job than I thought it would be, and I enjoy it. But having a little bit of extra backing on that is helpful. One thing that comes to mind is probably sorcery. So sorcery, I just think like I'm really proud of that project in general. Like I just think it's a great team. It's a worthy project to bring to the world. But I just like really enjoyed working on the branding. I feel like it came out. So that's the contribution, I should say, is branding sorcery. I was am the design lead on that project. So it's, I got to design the brand identity. I got to design the, whole interface of the app. Got to work with some really great students on the overall UI and implementing that. And that's something that like, that one I'm really proud of, just because it's a huge project. It's something that I think is like really important. And I also think it came out pretty well. There were exactly 2 years from our very first meeting to our like launch day. And I do like remember sitting in like the room on that first day, and Tom being like, okay, here's this idea that I have. Here's where I think everybody fits into this and what we can bring to the table. And here's how I think we could make this thing. And to like, then just say, all right, and we're going to do it. And then we did it. Like, there's something about that like, it's cool to be a part of a team that actually says like, here's this wild idea I've got, let's do this thing. And then we actually like find a way and make it happen. I don't think I can ever go without having a dual monitor again. I have so many pictures of my baby up here, who's like a toddler now. I can't even call him baby anymore, because he's out of daycare, and that makes me real sad. But it's nice to have like a little bit of motivation.